Around 47 million Americans have voted early in this year's presidential election that is now just a week away. 25 million votes were cast in person, 23 million votes returned by mail. Meanwhile, the disgraced former president held an embarrassing press conference at Mar-a-Lago this morning. He arrived an hour late and then went on to describe his Madison Square Garden rally, which has been widely condemned for racism, bigotry, and Nazism, as a love fest.
I don't think anybody has ever seen anything like what happened the other night at Madison Square Garden. The love in that room.
Trump claimed he didn't hear any of the comments made by a so-called comedian about Puerto Rico being an island of floating garbage, a line that reportedly was practiced the night before at a Manhattan comedy club. When asked about the comments, Trump did not denounce them, just repeated that he didn't hear them. As predicted, he also said that he didn't know the comedian, saying, "I don't know him, someone put him up there, I don't know who he is." A senior campaign advisor for Donald Trump said the speeches from Sunday's Madison Square Garden rally, which included racist remarks and dangerous threats about immigrants, were vetted beforehand. Many of the remarks from Sunday appeared to be read from teleprompters, indicating that they'd been approved by someone within the event's planning team.
Politicians that have been doing this for a long time, 30 and 40 years, said there's never been an event so beautiful. It was like a love fest, an absolute love fest, and it was my honor to be involved.
Meanwhile, back at his future exile palace in Florida, Trump said, "I don't think anyone has ever seen anything like what happened the other night at Madison Square Garden. The love in that room, it was breathtaking." Trump has said the same thing about the U.S. Capitol riot that he incited, that there was so much love there. Trump is confirming what psychologists have been telling us for years, that Donald Trump doesn't know what love is. He's never been loved. He doesn't know how to love. To him, everything is transactional. Which is why, when he said recently that he got to know Kim Jong-un very well and had no problem with him, and then went on to say that we have a bigger problem with the enemy from within, we have Americans that are really bad people.
No, they've done very bad things to this country. They are indeed the enemy from within.
We need to decipher the code. And that is that, to Trump, the enemy from within is anybody who doesn't praise Trump. Anybody who opposes him, from political leaders to regular voters, from the free press to protesters, American citizens, to him, are the enemy within. Whereas Kim Jong doesn't trash him, at least to his face, and therefore he has no problem with him. He can ignore the threats of military action, or Kim's support of Russia in Ukraine, or his restrictions on freedom of expression, their forced labor rules, including of children, food insecurity, and that for North Koreans leaving the country without permission is a crime of treachery against the nation, punishable by death. If you can't see how Trump is already a dictator, already an authoritarian, then you're missing the moment. We have to believe Trump when he tells us who he is. It's not an act, it's not a joke or sarcasm. He's been a narcissistic racist all his life, so let's not get distracted with the media coverage of the racism at the rally. I mean, what did you expect? It seems to me that Trump supporters fall into two categories. The brainwashed MAGA merchandising cult, who follow him everywhere with flags, and the former Republicans who choose corporation tax cuts over humanity, who are generationally racist and misogynistic. Maybe not as much as Trump himself, but just enough to connect with him, to be tickled by this common ground where Trump says the quiet parts out loud in a way the closet racists wish they could. I see few redeeming features in people that choose big business over their own rights, regulations that keep them safe, international allegiances with allies rather than enemies, and this mass hysteria over immigration, considering this is a nation of immigrants. Meanwhile, career law enforcer Vice President Kamala Harris will do 5 interviews today ahead of her closing argument speech in Washington, D.C. this evening, according to her campaign. The interviews will include 4 battleground state television interviews to reach voters in Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, as well as a Spanish radio station with Rumba in Pennsylvania. Harris has really stepped up her interview game in recent weeks, and I'm proud of her calling out Trump and his movement as fascist. Unlike Europeans who have come face to face with fascism, America's history hasn't seen anything like regime change. Trust me, it will affect everything we do and how we live. Trump and Vance like to publicly brush it off, but secretly, they're proud of being next in a long line of dictatorships. Their policies, their rhetoric, their empty threats, they all follow the language patterns of the rise of fascism, some of it word for word. From poisoning the blood of the country to America is for Americans only. We'd better wake up to what's coming. The national polls are getting closer as Election Day draws nearer. As I said yesterday, I believe it's all part of Donald Trump's plan to claim the election was fraudulent, and for his secret plan with MAGA Mike Johnson to steal it is now in place. Now, let's not forget that Speaker Johnson himself is also an insurrectionist and promoted perhaps the most far-fetched conspiracy theory bouncing around at the time, that two voting technology companies, Smartmatic and Dominion Voting Systems, flipped millions of votes from Trump to Biden as part of an international plot. These claims were false. Dominion and Smartmatic later filed defamation lawsuits against many of the pro-Trump media outlets and figures who peddled the lie, though they didn't sue Mike Johnson. Fox News settled with Dominion for more than $787 million. Johnson later recruited a majority of House Republicans to endorse a Trump-backed lawsuit seeking to invalidate the results from 4 key states that Trump lost: Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The Supreme Court swiftly rejected the case. The legal brief that Johnson submitted, along with 125 of his fellow House Republicans, claimed that unconstitutional irregularities involved in the 2020 presidential election cast doubt upon its outcome and the integrity of the American system of elections. Hours after the January 6 riot was over, when Republicans objected to the Democratic electors from Arizona and Pennsylvania, Mike Johnson voted for the objection, which would have disenfranchised over 10 million voters and would have deprived Biden of 36 electoral votes that he legitimately won. Now, if Republicans lose Congress, MAGA Mike Johnson will be replaced as House Speaker with Hakeem Jeffries, so I don't fully understand Trump's secret plan yet, but I guess we're just a week away from finding out. It's still bonkers to me that the man who tried to overturn the election because he didn't like the outcome is allowed to run for election again and has a plan to overturn it again, and we're all just having to sit here and wait for it to happen. Fortunately, a new poll says that most Americans think that Vice President Kamala Harris is prepared to accept the outcome of the presidential election, while only 30% feel that Donald Trump is prepared to do the same. So people know that Trump won't respect the outcome, which means that they're not going to vote for a candidate that doesn't respect the democratic process, our institutions, and the rule of law, which confirms my suspicion that Donald Trump is going to lose. But what really matters is by how much he loses. It has to be a significant, sinking, resounding loss for clarity, for democracy, for America's future. Please go vote. I can't and wish I could, but you can. Don't waste it. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.